Physical training, self-defense training, firearms training, situational awareness, and the warrior mindset. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast. This is a podcast where we'll be talking about being ready. We'll also be speaking to victim survivors of physical encounters, how they dealt with the aftermath, physically, mentally, and spiritually. Welcome to the Condition 1 podcast with me, your host, John Riddle. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the Crestwood Technology Group. CTG supplies the defense and aviation industries with critical parts and materials designed to keep fleets and systems operational, ready, and safe. Check out the Crestwood Technology Group at ctgnow.com. Okay, welcome to the Condition 1 podcast with me, your host, John Riddle. On today's segment, we have Master Terry Giles on board with us. Terry is a martial arts master and world champion and operated a series of successful gyms and training studios over 3 decades. It started with a single martial arts studio, and in addition to teaching students the history and disciplines of the traditional arts, Master Giles specialized training techniques and physical conditioning regimes in full contact fighting, competition sparring, and defensive tactics, had him sought after by martial artists from around the country and abroad. This grew into multiple locations that focused on reality-based training. Master Giles having adopted a philosophy early on in the martial arts and ever evolving, and that the true spirit of martial arts through practical application of the arts into real-world situations had to be addressed. He understood this and took it upon himself to take care of this issue. In this time, Master Giles had become a staff instructor with Executive Security International in Aspen, Colorado. A skilled combat shooter, he became a range master under legendary firearms instructor John Farnham. Master Giles combined his unique skill set and created a unique, realistic training scenarios and combative training system geared specifically for real-life personal protection. Master Giles was pursued by numerous law enforcement, government, federal, military, and private sector agencies to provide specialized training, conditioning, and team organization. He took students through hand-to-hand and unarmed combat drills, comprehensive firearms training, as well as physical, mental, and physiological training regimes. He expanded to include 2 weightlifting gyms that specialized in performance training for all sports. Terry became world-renowned for his cross-training ideas and innovations. His vast knowledge of performance nutrition and sport-specific training drew athletes from all over the world. This all culminated into his last training facility, which occupied over 18,000 square feet and consisted of martial arts training, full powerlifting, bodybuilding training, nutritional counseling, and an extensive cross-training and performance training. Wow. There's a lot of stuff there. And I'm here to tell you, I've trained with Terry, probably 12 years at his gym in weightlifting, bodybuilding, and also in the martial arts. He was my martial arts instructor. I hold a black belt under Terry. And although I started dabbling in martial arts at the age of 16 and boxing in Philadelphia, where I grew up. Training with Terry really set the path for me and where I am today. So he gave me a great foundation, and we're going to talk about some of his philosophies today and what he's doing, and it's going to be a very interesting show. So I want to welcome aboard Master Terry Giles.
John, how are you? It's good to see you again, my brother.
Good to see you. It's been a long time.
It has, too long.
So, Terry, just to usually, we know each other. We know each other for a long time, and through different ups and downs, and a lot of ups. some things we do and do not want to talk about. But an icebreaker question I usually have is, what is the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning, and what does your typical day look like?
Well, I'm an early riser. I'm up at 4 or 4:30. Usually I'll hit the bike, get some stationary bike training in just to get the cardio going. Usually we'll skip my morning meal, which is that's an old age thing. I've just gotten into that habit of I'm on the move. So I'll eat a little bit later in the day. And then my day now consists of, I run a company that's about a $200 million company. So it's pretty complex in all the moving parts. You and I've talked about this before. I think I've carried my background from martial arts and everything I've done into the business world, where I believe that maintaining good business is maintaining the good discipline that I had when I had all of my schools and gyms.
Yeah. And I remember kind of outside of just training with you, watching you, and you were always dabbling in some other type of businesses, which I thought was pretty impressive. And I think, yeah, that was your learning phase, maybe back in the early days, you know?
Yeah, it was, John. I mean, it was, and it's funny being a martial artist and being involved in the scope of what that entailed, learning and then teaching, opening schools, opening gyms. You're a school owner and you're an instructor, and it can be an up and down industry. And so you always do things to make sure that you solidify what your future can be. And I think that it goes back to psychological discipline to follow through and hold yourself accountable, not just your students and the people around you that you're training, but hold yourself accountable.
Absolutely. And I am learning that also as we go. We've been open 12 years here. I've been teaching 12 years in my own school. Time is flying by. And the accountability for yourself, your students, and the business itself is really important to keep it up and keep it running,
Exactly.
So when did you start in your martial arts training?
I was 6 or 7 years old. There was a Korean gentleman who had been sponsored by the church that I went to that was brought to this country. And through my association with the family that was sponsoring him, I got to sweep the karate studio every day. I got to clean the dirty towels. I got to wipe up sweat. And eventually I earned my place on the mat. And that evolved into, by the time I was 16, earning my black belt. I was fortunate to study under YK Kim, OC Chun, PL Cho. I mean, just a countless group of people. And much like yourself, once I earned my rank, I felt that I had just scratched the surface of learning. And so I would take every opportunity to learn from anyone that I could, because if you take your mind as a canvas and you paint out just a little corner, that's what you learn in 16 or 18, 10, 12, 15 years of training.
Right. And
you've got this whole blank canvas that's still out there. So I was fortunate in my time that there were places like the Academy, the Aspen Academy of Martial Arts, which was really just a giant tent where every year for 3 weeks, martial artists from all over the world would gather. And I got to meet with some really impressive people. It's how I came to know Bob Dugan and got involved with ESI. And, through that, I got involved with people like Jack McGeorge, who was a Marine and also a Secret Service man for Gerald Ford. And I got to meet Paul Ekman and David, all these guys that came from backgrounds that may not have been where I was headed, but they had something to do with where I was going. Gotcha. And so I looked at, and from studying under me, I look at, this is our life, right? So this is not something we put on in the morning and we take off at night. Right. This is not a pair of pants, right?
Exactly.
This is our life. And you have people that go through life so one-dimensionally. And I know a lot of good martial artists, and you and I have mutual friends that are very good martial artists. Many of them live, and this is not a criticism, but it's a 1 or 2 dimensional life. I hope that that I shed on my students my philosophy of a three-dimensional life. I know that you've gotten it. You're one of the students that I'm most proud of, and I'm not doing that as a blow and smoke thing. You have taken what you learned and you've taken the solid platform, and you learned like I did. You learned the basic foundation. There's a lot to be said for learning basic foundational martial arts, traditional martial arts.
Absolutely.
It teaches you discipline. It teaches you repetition.
Mm-hmm.
Then you moved into, like I did, where I became, I fought for many years in bare fist full contact kumite and was very successful. I trained fighters. I worked with points contact people. I got very disillusioned with, not unlike many people get disillusioned with mass religion and things, because the church becomes more important than the belief, right?
Right.
I think that some of the federations and associations, they lost sight of what they were supposed to do, and the school or the federation became far more important than the students and the learning.
Mm-hmm.
And so we develop our own system that becomes a cumulative hybrid system of all of the things that we've learned, and we try to give that to our students. And then beyond that, I saw that the martial arts was just one facet of personal protection. So, I was avidly involved in competitive firearms, but also with John Farnham, learning how to actually teach competitive shooting and combat shooting and scenario situations. I 7 championships as a race car driver.
Yeah.
I think that if you don't know how to completely understand how to use your car as a weapon, or to use escape and evasion driving as a technique in your livelihood as a person who protects people or protects your family, you're missing another part of that solution, let's
Sure.
say.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's kind of how I mean, we could talk for hours
Mm-hmm.
on the past, but I think you came in to my school and studied with me at a time when I was kind of breaking from tradition more so than adhering to it. Yet I still taught the traditional principles of, you will learn these forms.
Absolutely. And that's, like I said, when I was growing up, I was involved in the very traditional area in the Taekwondo, and then broke away from it for a while. In law enforcement, we get the defensive tactics side of the house, right? And we know how limited that is.
Yes.
And when I came to you, it was like, okay, I'm back in this traditional setting. And then it was like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not back in this traditional setting. Do I like this? Do I not like it? Right? And it took me several years to figure out what you were doing. And I mean, I had this epiphany just a couple years back because of what I'm doing here. You know what? Terry had it right the whole time. He had it right the whole time.
Thank you, brother.
It's a thing that, you can't be one dimensional, and even today, I think some people look down on that in the martial arts world. They for one reason or another. And
Well,
do
if
you
I
see
can,
that?
John, I don't. Yeah, yeah, I don't want to interrupt you in that thought process, but in joining with you in that, and I appreciate you saying that, because I know there were students that had been with me a long time prior to you joining, right? And
Mm-hmm.
and they kind of got that. They were with me when I was very, very traditional, and they saw me moving away because they saw what I went through, and one of those things is like being associated with Farang, and because I came from the Kuksul side,
Mm-hmm.
and with the Farang practitioners, it became a monopoly, and it was about how much you paid the association, how much you paid the group, and how
Right.
much you did this, and they wanted a percentage of what you were. Well, I won all of my championships as in bare fist kumite on what I taught myself. Now I used the foundational principles of the Kuksul, the Tang Soo Do, the Mudokwan, the Chain Kwan, all of those things that I was exposed to. However, I felt like they were limited, and I wanted to evolve them. So, to answer something that you and I've probably never spoken about, um, I was in a time when I watched a very impressive martial artist in West Palm Beach, Warren Siciliano,
Mm-hmm.
who ran a system called Karate, which he basically evolved and developed, much like what you and I have done in present day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I watched the ridicule that he went through because it was a homemade karate. It was, you know, it was all BS. It was, you know, and it was all because it didn't tie back to some guy in 13 BC that studied under a Hindu himself, or right, you know. And so fast forward, right? So you know, Bob Dugan and I are still friends, and we still talk, and we go back to we were some of the original American Farang stylists, and that's a very fragmented group. We were all excommunicated. We were all stripped of our rank within that system. You can take my belt because I didn't pay your dues, but you're not going to take the knowledge that I've evolved and developed.
Absolutely.
So when you came to the school, I was a businessman running a gym and running schools. I was well respected in the defensive tactics by the police and military that I'd trained, and you can attest to that from what I took to the city of West Palm Beach and to the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department when I started training their SWAT teams and working with you and the CAT team. I think it was the first time some of your guys had ever trained with contact.
Oh, absolutely.
And it scared the bejesus out of
Sure
them,
did.
right? But what I was trying to get at was I had to balance between how do I run my school profitably without making a belt factory, teaching what I know is going to save somebody's life versus teaching them the traditional kick, punch, throw, right?
Right.
And I was a little nervous to completely break away into what today I would step out and say, I will teach the foundation up to a certain point so they learn the movements. But at that point, I've got to break them out and teach them the things like you teach today and I teach today. It's combatives, it's real life scenario. And so, yeah, I think I was hard to swallow for a lot of people. And I will agree with you. There are people that look at what some stylists do today. You know, you take a Kelly McKeon who's very well versed in what he does. There were martial artists that would look at that and say, "Oh, that's not karate. That's not martial arts. The hell, it's not." You know, stand in front of the man and try to stick a knife in his gut.
Absolutely.
And where you're going to end up, right? And so I think that you saw it, you lived it with me. The students that the few students that I still train today or that I'll work with, mainly I do, you know, like, you know, I'll come in and do a seminar and talk about practical application. And I really like to talk about the totality of the mindset, being three-dimensional in everything you do. So I think what I appreciate most about you is you've taken what I did and you've continued that. I think you know, in the traditional martial arts is you've carried the torch, but really what you've done is you've opened a new generation of eyes. See, at 61 years old, you're carrying the torch, and you and I are about the same age. I'm now working back with more military people being around Redstone Arsenal in this part of the country and all of the defense contractors that are here. And you're kind of doing what I was doing. You've got the civilian set, which come to your studio in Boca, which is, I mean, you know, that's doing God's work, brother, because you're teaching people how to defend themselves. And then you've got your other contracts where you're working with companies and things like that. We have to give this message out, John, because the traditional martial artists are still mired in the belt factory concept of when that student enters, I can keep him for X number of years and he's going to generate X number of dollars. I don't want to do that. I want to have students like you. I remember I was teaching dynamic entry concepts and I was teaching the cross body block, and we did it with your SWAT team. I laid you out. I laid 3 or 4 guys out. Half the room left and said they didn't want to do that. Yeah,
we're going to lunch.
And I remember when you came into the school. I think it was a couple days later, and you kind of gave me the bro hug, and you said you saved my life. And I said, "What do you mean?" You said, "I did an entry into a house. The guy came at me, and I did the crossbody block. I knocked him to the ground, and the gun that he was holding fell out of his hand." And at that point, I could have stopped teaching because I had done what I was supposed to do. I taught somebody how to save their own life.
Right. And on this side of the house down here, it's that feeling, you know, because I've had some people come back to me and tell me similar things, you know, and you can't beat that feeling. you know,
It's
not at
why we
all.
do this.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
if I did it for the money,
Yeah,
I would have been worthless. I'd have been worthless.
right.
You know,
Yeah,
we have to pay our bills, but at the same token, I believe that we all have a martial calling if we're at a certain level. And I feel like I was kind of a pioneer I can see it a little more clear now from conversations with you and other people that I have reconnected with that studied with me for 15 or 20 years that I haven't seen in 15 or 20 years. And I guess it was kind of evolutionary, the process that I thought we take these fundamental movements and these basics, we evolve them into real day hand-to-hand tactics. We incorporate guns, we incorporate psychology profiling, we incorporate situational awareness, we associate physiology and understanding the body. You know as well as I do from being in a ring with me, I've spent hundreds of thousands of hours in a ring. I know pretty much what my opponent's going to do before he does.
right.
My mind's a Rolodex.
Mm-hmm.
It's every person I've ever faced and confronted in my mind, and I watch their body dynamic and their movement so that I can assess what their capability of is, and I know how to think about how I'm going to defend myself.
Right.
The
Well,
only
see,
person that ever hurt me was a white belt when he kicked me with something that is physiologically impossible. And I'm like, what the hell? Where'd that come from? You can't do that. And I was like, I don't know if he had extra bones or didn't have bones in that leg. But my God,
yeah,
it was like, and it teaches us a lesson. We get humbled quickly sometimes by the lowest ranking students in
oh,
our school.
absolutely. And you talk about your experience in the ring, and I often, very often, reflect back to what you taught me in the ring, and I take that here, you know, and it makes sense. Everything makes sense that I learned from you, and I'm still passing that on to other people. So
And I see it in your videos that I watch. I go, my God, it's like looking in a mirror sometime. I mean, you've taken what I've taught you and for your body and for the person you're training, I watch you adapt things to them to fit them the way that I did with you and other students
absolutely,
that excelled, and John, I mean, I over my years of teaching, I turned out just over a dozen quality black belts such as yourself,
mm-hmm.
and that's out of hundreds of students. But I mean, there was a process to get into my school. I didn't want to just teach people. I wanted to teach people that wanted to learn. I didn't want to teach people that wanted a belt.
Yes, and I have this thought pattern and I talk to people about, and it's you've got people to come in that, and I always say that maybe there's three reasons why people show up at a school, right? One, they see something that you do and they think it's cool, and they want to come in and they want to do that, right? They usually don't last too long.
Right.
Then you got somebody that comes in that needs to be like, my classes are from 6:30 in the evening until 8 o'clock at night. So it's, some people need to be there, something to do between 6:30 and 8 o'clock, and they show up every so often and they get what they get, right? They get out of it what they get out of it. Then you have
Right.
people come in for a purpose. And I think, that purpose is, hey, I had something happen to me and I never want that to happen again. And
Yep. Or it happened to a friend of mine and I don't want to be a victim.
Absolutely. And it's that connection, right? And it's
Right.
because you get a lot of people that say, "Oh, why do you do what you do? It's it's a safe world. Boca Raton's really safe." Well, how many people do you know that had something happen to them? Okay, you may know them personally. Maybe it's a friend of yours' friend, but there's still that connection. And I said it's that close to you.
Yeah.
And if something already happened to you, then you're a little behind the ball. You're going to get ahead of it if you start to understand, look, I need to do something to protect myself, protect my family, right? Especially in today's crazy world. So,
Yeah.
so I need to get on the stick and I need to start training, right? And then those people usually are the ones that come in and for that hour and a half they're on my mat or training with you, they leave everything on the mat,
Yep.
and they're the ones that'll succeed.
Well, that's, John, you touch on something. It's not only an emotional connection that you get with that student. There's a psychological connection, right?
Right.
And really, it boils down to, yeah, it's a safe world in most respects. In certain areas that you and I have traveled, It's a safe world. Then there's other areas of the world that you and I have traveled that we know are just not structured, not safe, and they're at any time chaos can happen, right?
Right.
All the years, and it was what, almost 20 years that I was involved in executive protection at a high level. The chance of protecting somebody against a true kidnapping attempt was 0.5%.
Right.
The chance of being in the wrong place at the wrong time was 99% of what you were going to face. You pull up and you're getting gas and somebody decides to rob the gas station. You're driving down the street and somebody, whatever it is, right? Mm-hmm. The situation. And what you had to always teach your clients was that this is about awareness and putting yourself in positions to not lose or not have, there was an expression in the executive protection industry that, it was dead clients don't pay. Mm-hmm. Well, I used to say that I got a message for you. Dead bodyguards can't collect either. Right.
Right.
So mm-hmm. if I'm in a position, if I put myself and my client in a position where I have to pull my gun or use physical force, unless I'm, talking about in today's world, I'm part of a brigade that's watching a political figure or somebody that's a public figure that people despise, and you get all these crazy people. Look at Larry Elder and the girl throwing eggs at him, and right. Then mm-hmm. he had really not. If you watch that, there wasn't much protection around him, and you got all these people then in the street that start posturing. Mm-hmm. That could become a very dangerous situation.
Absolutely. Yeah,
and it goes back to where was the observational psychology? Where was the situational awareness? And that's what I think, if we get those emotional bonds and those psychological bonds with those few students, and it's a few students, mm-hmm. we can get them to understand there's 3 dimensions to this world, and not the one, you get the guy that comes in and he's a great kicker, great puncher, and a great fighter. That's only part of it. You've got to be able to have all of the other. You've got to have this. Absolutely. If you don't have that, you're lost, brother. And
100%. Yeah.
100%. And how many good fighters did you see get in the ring with me? And in 25 or 30 seconds, I've dissected them to the point where they're like, man, this is crazy. Well, you came in with the wrong mindset.
Yeah.
You came in thinking you were going to kick my ass. Mm-hmm. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. I believe the mindset, and I talk to people every day about mindset, and survival mindset out on the street. Right. And it's, look, 28 years in law enforcement, and being able to look at people and be able to read their body language, and understand that he may be a threat. How do I start looking at this, and how do I dissect this now and either make space, leave, or if I can't, now I've got to get combative. You have to look at the body. You have to look at that person's body and understand Absolutely. Where they are. And that's a big part of what I teach here, that it's not all punching and kicking. It's not. It's really not. It's, you got to get people to start thinking about what they're going to do. Why are they in the place they are, right? And then be able to think about, okay, if I'm here and I see this, I have options. So if you're not using this, you're going to get caught. You're going to get caught. And at a young age in law enforcement, I got caught a couple times before learning that, hey, use this. This is the first thing. This is 95%. I'm going to lean that a little high, but I think 95% is this. The rest of it,
absolutely, Yeah. And because you got to remember, that's also your reference center, right? That's your library. Right. Not only are you using it for thought, you're using it for recall. Mm-hmm. How does a person like this usually move? What is this situation? I've got this is there, the street signs there, this is that, that's that. Okay, so you and I are talking about defending ourselves, right? So now let's put the burden of, now I've got my wife, girlfriend, my sister, my mother, mm-hmm. or I've got my family. So not only do I have to contain this initial area of confrontation for myself, mm-hmm. I have to protect things that are not part of my appendage. These things aren't attached to me,
right?
And they're going to move about and do. Mm-hmm. And there were situations where we were contracted to to get people out of bad situations, and I'll put it that way. And I can remember how many hours we would put into the dynamic of not only the entry or the approach, but once we had the person that we had to have out of a situation and we'd neutralize, let's say, the bad guys, right? I don't know how that person's going to react. So not only do I have to contain that person, contain the combatives, I've got to also understand the psychology of this person that we're supposed to carry to safety.
Right.
And that creates a whole nother
Dynamic.
set of nightmares.
Right.
Yeah, it does. It's like rescuing a drowning person, and that person out of fear or just reflex starts to drown you.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's so much that goes into the psychology of self-defense that honestly I felt no longer did the traditional methods of training, other than teaching the foundational principles. I felt that we as a society moved past the demand, right? It became a greater threat on so many different levels that if we didn't start to address the psychological side of self-defense, the physical side of our own bodies, the physiology of understanding our opponents, and all of how to capture our surroundings to use to our benefit as weapons, then we were really just pounding sand. Yeah. I mean, and so right that's where you came into my philosophy of teaching right about that time. And I think that, since, and you and I haven't had a whole lot of time other than some, I pass by and wave and we have a text or something.
Sure.
We haven't spent much time on the mat together. I believe that my life experiences has taught me further evolution, right? So even in how I handle and teach firearms, with when I got my right eye injury and I had to get out of a race car, and I never, I was so wrapped up in that, right? I was so one-dimensional in my life at that point, because that was what my life was becoming, right? Mm-hmm. I was running businesses off of it, and I was successful at it. And I realized, wow, this depth perception and this loss of peripheral vision has affected my shooting. Now it's affected my hand-to-hand and my observational ability to see outside the realm of my safety space. I had to relearn a lot of things. And so I guess in some way I was fortunate. I look at it as a gift today, and I didn't then. But it had me go back through, how do you teach something to an old dog? How do you teach those new tricks, right? So I had to re-educate myself. Mm-hmm. And through that, I came up with some different teaching principles that helped me learn. I can shoot as good left-handed as I can right-handed. Mm-hmm. I can understand depth perception because I now position my body with what has become my weak vision side back, so that I get a better peripheral out of my left eye. I mean, you have to learn these things, man. Sure. Hey, we're not getting younger. Right. I used to, I remember Mark Juckett, my sparring partner, mm-hmm. who was actually one of Warren Siciliano's, he weighs 6'5", 280 pounds. Mm-hmm. And he and I would get in the ring and bang each other for about 2.5 hours. I don't care who you are. It hurts. Right.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd be up the next morning at 4:30 and in the gym working out. Mm-hmm. If I got in the ring and he and I did that today, I'll see you in 6 months, brother. That stuff hurts.
That's so true. That's so true. Now, talking about your philosophies and what you just talked about how you are adapting your body now to where you might have to take it later. Okay.
Right.
How do you teach those philosophies to students coming in?
Okay, so it goes back to, I'm going to take on a dozen students today, and in the course of the first few days, I'm going to wash probably 8. At the end of the first week, there'll be 2. There'll be one person that truly has that desire to learn the philosophy, learn the way, and understand. That's the person that I'll spend the time teaching. Okay. So, I mean, I think there's a weeding process, unfortunately.
Right.
But how do I teach that one person? The first thing is you have to develop, I believe, that that bond of trust, right? That what I'm showing you. So I'll show a group of people something, and then we'll have to individually work with each person based on their limitations. Guy's got a bad hip, guy's got a bad knee, guy's got some limited eyesight, guy has arthritis. I can teach a 70-year-old woman how to defend herself, and it's going to be different than how I would teach a 25-year-old guy how to defend himself. So I think it's, and that's where I feel very fortunate in having such a history in the cross training development and training, the physicality part of understanding people's abilities and limitations, watching how they work and understanding their own natural physiology and their ability to adapt to a situation. I think it's incumbent upon us as an instructor to help the students identify and label their shortfalls, shortcomings, and their limitations. If we're not accurate in telling them their limitations, they're going to have a real misconception up here of what they're capable of doing.
Right.
You said it. Guys see you do something and that's cool. Or back in my day, they'd watch a Chuck Norris movie and they'd come in and they want to learn karate, right? Not everybody can do that. But everybody, brother, everybody, and you know this to be fact, can defend themselves better tomorrow with training than they can today without.
Absolutely.
And even if it's just that through situational awareness and observational psychology and understanding certain limitations within themselves, they could immediately be safer because they will not put themselves in a stupid situation.
Agreed. But trying to get this in people's heads that come in and they talk to you and they say, hey, I don't think anything's ever going to happen. You've dealt with these people, I'm sure. I deal with it every day. I hear it every day. Oh, nothing's going to happen. We live in a nice city. Everything's cool. But how do you break it to them?
Okay, so in my firearms class, right, I've got about 75 slides that I show that shows, and they're homicide slides. Somebody who was beat to death with a hammer, somebody who was stabbed to death with a screwdriver, somebody that was, burned with a gas cannon, and basically the storyline is, if you have a weapon, and you saw me do this with one of your City of West Palm Beach brethren once, when I'll just use initials, when JJ said, "There's no way that you can get to me. You can't cover 21 feet," and he had his gun pointed at me, and I took the slide off his 92F Beretta before he could drop the hammer, and I covered 21 feet. Right. What was I? I was at that time when I was powerlifting and teaching, I was 290 pounds, 285 pounds. And he thought there's no way a big man's going to move that fast. Right. So I illustrate to people when they see me move and they're like, wow, big guy moves fast. And then you show them these slides and say, I know you think because you have a gun or you've got a little bit of training that a guy with a screwdriver can't hurt you. And then I show them certain news stories that I pull out of the news that are simple things. The guy that was living across the street from this family, and this guy had done flakka, and he goes over there and he's murdering the family, and he goes and he's just trying to be a good Samaritan. Next thing he knows, he's laying down in the front yard being stabbed in the stomach with a fork. Right. Yeah. I mean, whoever would have thought, right? Or, it's that happenstance. I mean, how many times did you and I go to a nightclub back in the days and we'd watch fights break out, and next thing you know, innocent people are pulled into this surrounding.
Absolutely.
Or, you're in a restaurant and somebody decides that they need a fix and they rob that restaurant. There was a situation here at an International House of Pancakes. Guy walks in to rob the place. The cook has a gun. The cook pulls the gun. Of course, wasn't trained to shoot. And so inadvertently, it was an off-duty cop that leveled the guy. But I mean, this thing broke out and 3 or 4 people got shot. Yeah. And it was all it was all because there was no awareness to the situation, right?
Sure.
So I think when you show people actual examples, and you take the news right now, you've got a boyfriend and girlfriend who went cross country. Now the girl's missing.
Yeah.
Do you think that anybody ever thought something like that was going to happen? No. You need to know, parents need to know who their kids are dating, even if their kids are adults. Yeah. You need to know where your family members are traveling, even if they're adults. You need to have all of this communication and awareness, because unfortunately bad things do happen, and usually it's circumstantial. Of the circumstances, what I mean is, you're in a circumstance or you're in a situation that you had no idea would ever happen. And you know, dude, if people don't see that that's the world we live in today, because of all of there's just some loony shit going on, brother. I don't know any other way to say it. And I hate to, it's you have to be aware. Just because the guy's crazy-eyed doesn't mean he's a crazy person.
Right.
It's that quiet person, the one that just you see walking by all the time, and then all of a sudden you find out that some neighbor's animal was killed, or some neighbor's kid was kidnapped, or whatever. You never know who it is you're walking next to.
Absolutely. And people being, especially in the firearms world, okay, we're seeing it now. Probably the firearms community doubled, if not tripled, over the last, since March, since before March, right? Because,
and there was a number that was put out. It was like 6 million new gun owners in a 3-month period of time or something.
Crazy, and during the initial COVID attack, my hand-to-hand started to slide down because we're in person, right? Well, it turns out that the scales, my self-defense started going down, but my firearms started going through the roof, right? And I'm out there on the range, and I'm watching people walk around with firearms in their hands, and you can tell they're brand new because they're like sitting there and they're like walking down the street, down the road to their bay, and they're lasering everybody, And it's a thing where, look, and I'm sure you agree with this, that it's an extension of this, right? We already talked about it. Now, I always talk about, where do you carry your firearm, okay? And do you have accessibility to it in a flash? Because we're always on the reactionary side, Something always happens. We see it. The information has to come to the brain, and like you said, we're a library up here, and we have to go through it. And I always relate it to throwing a light switch on, right? It's got to happen that fast. You got to see it. You got to react. And going back to that 21-foot rule, I have a mat. You have been in my place. My red grappling mats are 30 feet. And I had a group of people come in, men, only a little bit older, and they all were in this club. They were in a firearms club, and they would shoot. So when I had the shoot house here, using simunition, they came in. They did several classes with me, and they said, we can defeat a guy with a knife. We can, okay. So, and I don't even, I explained to them that, first off, the knife is never seen, right? It's always, you're going to feel it before you see it. And when it happens, it's not happened from across the street. If it happens from across the street and I'm a firearm owner, thank you. I'm moving, I'm getting cover, or I'm getting the hell out of there. And if I have to, I'm drawing my weapon out.
Right.
So, I put them on the mat, and I gave one of my guys, Chris, a red, it's no-lie blade. I take it, and it's a felt-tipped knife.
Right. And it's like the ones we used to train with.
Yeah, and I lipstick it up. And Chris is in a full simunition regalia, helmet, neck protection, groin protection, whole bit. This gentleman, I put a white T-shirt on him. Actually, I didn't even do that. I let him dress. I didn't want to skew anything. I didn't want to take it out of how he would ordinarily be. I said, where do you carry? And he carried it about the 5 o'clock position, back by his back pocket. He had a T-shirt on, and he had a button-down shirt over it with, the buttons unbuttoned. And I put him up. I put him up against the wall. The red mat is 30 feet long. Okay, so I added an extra 5 feet, 6 feet, for his, protection. I gave him another 6 feet. And Chris was down on the other end of the mat. He had the knife in his hand, visible, and he just paced back and forth like some cat in a cage, And I said, I'm not going to tell Chris when to attack. He's going to attack when he wants to. You're here. You see the knife. What are you going to do? So he, starts to explain to me what he's going to do. And I said, no, I want to see the action. I want to see you do it. Chris was on him in 34, 35 feet in a heartbeat. Guy couldn't get to the gun.
Yeah.
Couldn't get to it, And then we did it, and we did it, and we did it. And he was marked with red lipstick. And I said, okay, you're ready to learn something? He said, yeah. So I said, okay, there's a thing we call movement, getting off the X, whatever terminology you want to use, okay?
Yep.
But you got to move.
Yep.
As soon as your eye sees the threat, start moving. You have to change the target of the assailant, because then the assailant has to go to his library. Absolutely.
And that's what we're doing. When you trained with me long enough to know that, traditionally I would go into a police department or anything that was firearms versus bladed weapon, and I would easily cover 21 feet, and they'd be marked up and just, and I tell the story all the time when I was doing some knife fighting with Leo Gahi, and we were using what was a heavy leather bag to really practice with a bladed weapon. And I can remember just lighting into that bag and thinking, man, I am really getting this technique down. And of course, I walk off the mat and I realize both of my forearms are bleeding, my hands are bleeding, because with my knife and my cross blocks. And people don't realize just how dangerous, even if you're handling the weapon, how dangerous the blade is. I can shoot you multiple times, and if there's not loss of blood, there is no stoppage, right? I mean,
exactly,
because what facilitates stoppage is loss of blood and loss of blood pressure. So you give me a knife and I cut across the femoral artery and come back across, in any live organ. I mean, what am I, 2 to 3 seconds before you bleed out? I mean, they don't understand that, there was a statistic back when I was teaching a lot, and you'd say, okay, like it was, I think at that time it was about 12 or 15% of gun encounters were fatal, whereas it was in the high 70%, like 78, 79% of all knife encounters were fatal.
Right.
That tells you something, right? Because there's more loss of blood, there's more tissue damage, and there's more chance of, and so, and in the mindset today, people think these 6 million new gun owners, and it's not being derogatory towards them, but their assumption is I own a gun now, I'm bulletproof, I'm safe. Well, if you don't know how to use it, you're not. And by the way, gun doesn't always beat knife. It depends on the operator, right?
Yeah.
You and I have both seen some pretty talented knife fighting experts, and even with what I know, I want to be like you. I want to be across the street with a scope, because that's where I'll feel safe.
With something in between us.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to have a few cars or something between us at least. So
I'm a little
gets hit by a bus trying to come at me.
I'm a little slower today, So
yeah, but it's that mindset, John, where I support people buying guns and owning guns. I say that if you're going to buy a gun, please go to a class. Please, back in the day when there was no requirement other than a 2-hour safety course, and you could get your concealed weapons permit. Mine consisted of 6 hours of classroom and 12 hours of range time. I didn't feel good putting my name on anybody's concealed weapons certificate, to them to apply to the state. I didn't want to give them a certificate of completion. I wanted to know that they knew how to use a gun. Yeah. Because I didn't want them shooting somebody in their family or shooting themselves.
Absolutely.
I mean, come on, let's be real.
Yeah. And there's people doing classes today that are an hour.
Look, I live in an area where, we've got the arsenal, we've got all these defense contractors and aerospace, and I'm not that far from Royal Range, which is in Nashville. And Royal Range is I don't know if you need to look the facility up, cool facility. Old movie theater, so they can bring cars in, they can do all this.
Nice.
And their new gun owners program is really cool. It's like 6 hours. I mean, you can't, there's no easy way to get a concealed weapons permit in the state of Tennessee, or And so I always refer people that I know here in Alabama that get a gun and they say, will you train me? I set up, I'm very fortunate. When I first got here, I met a guy from my competitive shooting days that actually has a trap and skeet and a hunting range up here. He's got hundreds of acres. He throws international sporting clays and things like that. He's got trap and skeet houses. He allowed me to put in 100 target steel range,
Nice.
combatives, right? A really nice combat shooting range, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do scenario stuff there, and the FBI's moved in and the DEA's moved in here, that new facilities in Huntsville. And they've gone out and shot the range, and they're constantly complaining because they shoot 47s and 50s, and they tell him the range is too hard and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it goes back to the discipline, right?
Right.
If you shoot a 47, I can go out there with a bad eye, shoot it left-handed and shoot a 97. Now, granted, I set it up, but you can change it. It's about acquiring a target, right? It's about acquiring the sight picture and trigger manipulation. It's a fundamental.
Yeah.
So if you're shooting a 47 today, is it because the course is hard or you don't know how to shoot? Mm-hmm. I mean, I asked that question.
Sure.
And they get rah, 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 rah. Well, look, come on. You want to call yourself a qualified federal firearms instructor, then know what you're doing wrong. I worked with a guy at a range and I was teaching something and I saw how they were shooting, and I look, I mean, this person I had worked with a long time, and I'd seen him shoot other things, and this was a new gun. And so I took the gun and I shot it, and I was like, wow. Went over to the range master and I said, out of respect, right? I said, could you drift this front sight for me? I mean, this rear sight for me slightly, because the front sight where it's sitting in the position, I need you to drift it. Guy goes over and he was like, it took 20 minutes to shoot 4 rounds at 9 yards, and said there was nothing wrong with the sight. And I'm like, yeah, okay. So I ran the target all the way back out to 25 yards. I aimed high right so that I could adjust it with my vision.
Right.
And I put 9 through the same hole. And I said, yeah, you're right. It must be me. And he kind of looked, dejected, and it's like, it's real simple. Don't allow your ego to stand in front of your own knowledge, right? Or what you're going to learn. And I think so many people today, they'll stand in front, they're just so dead set that, well, I know John's teaching this, but I know this. And instead of opening their mind to what you're teaching and learning what information they can, they may not learn anything, or they may learn 10% or 90% or 80%. But the fact that they've already shut down because they already know it.
Right.
Their ego is not allowing them to expand their knowledge base. So basically, brother, their library is closed.
Yes.
They've got every book they need for the rest of their life.
Yep.
That's a dangerous situation right there.
Yeah, I've come across a few of those, and when a time comes to show on the range, what they show and what they talk about are two different things.
Well, but also, it's in defensive tactics too, brother.
Sure.
You've seen that, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I see it a lot. I mean, I talk to guys that were, and I have a high regard for a lot of the special teams and forces because, I had some relationships and so I have a high regard. But I can tell you this: you're not going to walk into a conference or a class or a seminar I'm teaching, and because you happen to have a certain insignia pinned on your coat, do I think that you know everything there is to know?
Exactly.
Because I was around when they built some of those systems, and I watched how those systems have degraded. I've got some guys that are local operators now that were part of the group that had flown in and helped liberate some of the Americans left behind in Afghanistan. And we went through some very specific conversations and training, and it was amazing to me what they've done with some of the modern hardware, these step draw holsters that are hanging down by their knee and different rigs that, come on, man, those are not practical for what you are going into today.
And a lot of them aren't even worn properly.
Exactly. And these are guys that I like I say, are highly skilled, but they were going into a very specific situation. And what they were doing was carrying obsolete information into a new scenario. And as well as I do, we have to assess every scenario the best we can when we're pre-training for it. And again, we can only pre-train for a scenario so much, because somehow, some way, something's going to be different when it actually falls down to real life.
Yeah, Murphy. Exactly. Exactly. All right, man. So, are you training people these days? I mean, how often?
I'm training some instructors.
Okay.
That's what I'm doing. I mean, I'm more, I guess I say it's more of a consultant role to their program to help them be better, whether it's helping them with teaching observational psychology, teaching physiology, teaching actual combative sequences,
Okay.
or teaching firearms. I mean, that's today it's more about me teaching instructors to be better instructors. I think I can touch more people that way than teaching a handful of people. Now I got a handful of people that every once in a while, I don't know whether I feel like I need to get beat up or they need to get beat up, and we'll throw each other around a little bit. But
Okay.
it's
Cool.
what I do now is I love to come to a school like it's got to be a place that I respect the instructor.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to be a school that I believe is teaching real life.
Mm-hmm.
And I love going to those places and doing a 1 or 2 day seminar, and hopefully people glean the philosophy and the mindset. And what it does is it reinforces what you're already teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and it gives them a perspective. Because a lot of times as an instructor, as people learn more, they start to venture out, right? They want to
Mm-hmm.
know more. It's really good when their core instructor or their foundational instructor gets reinforced by just something that somebody else teaches, and they go, wow, that's what he's been saying all along.
Okay.
And I know we share like principles and like minds, but that's kind of what I'm doing now. I try to stay ahead of my own injuries, and
Sure.
stay ahead of my own old age. I don't ever want to be complacent, because I believe all that I've learned over my 61 years has brought me to where I am today. And I know what I've done and what I've helped do. And I know the impact I've had on the martial arts world in certain realms. And I want to continue that. And I thought for a while I was ready to walk away.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, and for a period of time I did. And a lot of it was more because of situational, just being fed up with certain things.
Yeah. Get you.
Yeah.
I get you. All right. If somebody wanted to reach out to you, how can they get in touch with you?
They can email me at gilesterry@bellsouth.net, and correspondence through email. And then once we sort through things, I can make sure that they have a cell number or a way to text me, and we can do that. And they can always reach me through you.
Okay. Perfect. All right, man. We're going to wrap this up, and I definitely want to have you back on. Cause,
I would love it. We can, I think we'd spend a little less time catching up maybe, and give out some information that would be helpful to your students and to your
Absolutely.
podcast watchers.
Yeah.
But John, like I said, and I said it before, you're one of the few students that have carried the torch in a manner that I was intending to go. I've had guys that have gone on. You remember Chris Mansell from Texas?
Yeah.
He went on and won some full contact and point fighting championships and stuff. And there's other people that did what they did, whether they taught or opened schools, and they went traditional. But you're doing what was closest to my heart, and that is teaching real life, and teaching people how to be safer living the life that we're in. So yeah. I applaud you for what you're doing.
Well, hey man, it's it all, and I told you before, it all started with you. It all started with you, and
I appreciate that.
I'm grateful for the instruction over the years, and I will keep passing this torch as long as I can.
That's what we're supposed to do, brother. I look forward to not only seeing you in person, but being on the mat with you sometime.
I don't know about that. My ribs still hurt.
Come on. Come on, man. I'm getting old, man. I'm getting slow. That's what I tell them all.
Yeah, I'm sure. You're still the biggest guy and the fastest guy I know for your size. So
I just tell them, the worst part about getting old, it's like the older Dynamite gets, the more unstable it becomes.
Exactly. That's the truth. All right, brother. We're going to sign off. Bro. All right, man. And I'll reach out to you here in a couple of days.
Peace, brother.
Thank
you much.
Take care, man.
God bless you, brother.
Same here.